So my name is Kim Pallister. I run a group at Intel called the VR Center of Excellence. We work on VR and AR usages, technologies, devices, and look at ways that we can forward the state of the art, both with our own products and with partner products. We're a portion of the group, the CCG group at Intel that drives sales of notebook and desktop PCs. And this is a bit of a different talk for me. This came out of a design workshop exercise that we had to kind of envision, hey, where's this technology going? We find that wrapping some narratives and usage concepts around these things kind of gives us a focal point to kind of look at where the pain points are and what has to happen. And then it seemed to kind of get legs enough that we thought it warranted bringing here. So it's a little bit different than that I'm not pitching a product. I'm talking about kind of where the future of this stuff is going. A couple disclaimers at the beginning. I'm not a game designer. I'm a guy with a hardware and software background. As you heard in some of the previous talks, there are a lot of really difficult problems around AR and VR, many of which become the focal point for a lot of discussions. When will we get adequate resolution displays? When will the stuff get light enough that I can wear it all day? How will I deal with accommodating change of focus? How will I get an adequate level of compute in something that I can carry? These will all get solved, right? Like there's enough critical mass of companies, some of which that you see here, you see leaps and bounds in these things happening. And part of the way that we view this stuff as at Intel is just it's a matter of time, right? We apply Moore's law, we apply the economics of scale that'll happen over time, and it's just a question of when the different problems get solved, not if. However, as you'll see in some of the things we outline here, there are a bunch of other challenges that come with how you design things, experiences for a stage that is unknown at the time of authoring, how you deal with social acceptance of wearing devices that have cameras and other sensors on them in the presence of other people that might not appreciate that, how devices and applications and services are going to interoperate, how they're going to compete for and vie for a user's attention. We've heard several people citing issues around privacy. Privacy is really a word that only touches on the kind of tip of the iceberg. It's really a matter of like, who decides what constitutes data that is personal and private, and are you giving up that stuff even before you know the full implications of what it might do? These are really hard problems. And so this, in part, is an exercise in thinking about where things are going to evolve to over time, and get people, such as yourselves, working in this space to start thinking about them early. Last disclaimer is that nothing I'm saying here is indicative of a product. It's not a hint of a thing that's coming at any point from us. It's really all just a concept work. All right, so we're going to follow the course of a day in 2025 of a fictional person, this person, JJ. And JJ's a college student. She's going to college away from home at a school somewhere in Europe, and for the first time, and she uses technology to interact with her friends a lot. So she wakes up in the morning one day, and she's got this thing that we've called the DigiSquire. It's a combination of what might be today's cell phone together with a personal assistant that's actually embodied as a sort of avatar so that she can develop more of a relationship with it, and it can infer things beyond just words and tone of voice with its expressions. And in this case, it's kind of tapping its foot and saying, hey, it's time to get out of bed. And it tells her that, hey, by the way, you might want to get up because while you were sleeping last night, your AI representative played on your behalf in a trivia game with some friends, and you got in an argument with your friends, or with one of your friends, and you might need to go apologize to them, right? So we see this concept that that your play style and your play personality in different games experiences might go on to embody in an AI representative that may then be available to friends to go participate in, right? We've already seen kind of the first breadcrumbs of this kind of thing happening. If you look at what Microsoft's been doing with Forza Racing, where they have these AI drivers that are a one-to-one relationship with a user. So I can log off of Forza, but my driver can go race with my friends and embody a driving style that's representative of me, right? And we imagine these things happening and actually getting a level of trust over time that you would kind of not only say, hey, it's okay that that avatar went and got in an argument with my friend, but it was probably right because it agrees with my style of approaching these things. So she decides what she's going to do to deal with that. She'll send him a note later. She hops up out of bed and she puts on her AR specs, which are these glasses floating in the top left corner, sitting behind the DigiSquire. She puts them on, turns them on, and they're lightweight. They contain a certain amount of compute and graphics horsepower, but they're able to leverage other compute power that's available nearby. And so they do a kind of a handshaking with an edge server that resides within the home. And she heads down to breakfast, and when she's having her bowl of cereal, two things pop up in front of her as part of her daily ritual, much as you might log into Facebook today. She logs onto a thing that we've called the Society, an idea borrowed largely from the book Lady of Mazes that was a favorite of mine last year. And all of her friends and family, or a selection of them that might pop up on her feed today, instead manifest as small kind of Lilliputian avatars around her breakfast table, and they start kind of having a little cocktail party there in front of her that she can choose to pay attention to. Some of them are not live avatars. They're basically those AI representatives we saw previously, and they might just be conveying what happened a few minutes back or the previous evening, what's their latest kind of update. Other ones are live, and she can choose to engage with them in conversation or listen into what they're talking to if they are talking about with other friends if they've made that a public channel. As this is going on, she looks over to the right-hand side, and the mascot that's on the cereal box crawls down off of the cereal box and starts to get into a little fight with one of her friends, and like they're picking up spoons and smacking each other with them, and they're reenacting some Larry, Curly, and Moe types of antics on the table, which is giving her a giggle. And we called this mascot melee, and we're envisioning that could be an example of game-type applications that are borrowing from other IPs, and that things like open systems and hacker culture that are co-opting these things and using them in maybe unauthorized ways or unforeseen ways is still a thing that's going to exist, right? And you see this happening in things like VR chat today, where a lot of the kind of avatars people are embodying are like, there's like the really buff, muscular Winnie the Pooh that was kind of creepy, but also amusing, right? If you've seen that one. Or you certainly saw a lot of examples like that in the Ready Player One movie recently, right? So after she's done eating and she kind of tires of this, her specs give her this concept of different layers that she can flip to. And she switches off of that one and onto one that we've called Ubu or UBU. And it's kind of another version of a personal assistant, but with a couple differences from the last one that we've all kind of wrapped up in here to give these examples. The first thing is that it's more of a combination of personal coach and a little bit, part therapist, part coach, part buddy, that engages with her in a word association game and uses it to kind of throw some gentle reminders of, hey, you have this thing on your to-do list you might want to think about, how are you doing on that homework project, et cetera. It also coaches her through some breathing exercises and kind of gets her prepped for her day. And because this is interacting with her in a way that's really, that she's kind of sharing personal experiences and feelings with, it's monitoring her biometrics, et cetera. She's not necessarily comfortable with all of that data going elsewhere. So in the example that we've outlined here, this assistant actually runs locally on an edge server that we've drawn in this blue box off in the corner of the kitchen that kind of serves the house. But the idea is that it's an application run locally over which she has control of the data and what it does. The personal assistant kind of wraps up there and says, hey, it's probably time you get going. You got to head out to make the bus or the train to get to school. So she steps out, and her, probably the most simple and first go-to example of AR in glasses that we see is the example of a navigation application. So two concepts are embodied in this one beyond what you normally see. The first is that it's aware and able to communicate with other things dependent on her, upon which she is dependent, right? So in this case, it said, hey, I've checked the train that you're about to catch. It's running on time. You're going to have to pick up your pace a bit if you're going to make it. Or if you want to slow down, the next one's coming in 20 minutes, your call, right? And so she adjusts her pace to make sure she makes the train on time. The other thing is that the rendering that the thing will do here is arguably more simple because it could be done in a more complex way. We're envisioning it as a very simple on-device capability that says, okay, if I don't have bigger compute to leverage elsewhere and I'm not tethering this thing to a backpack or a belt pack or whatever, it's self-contained, I want to do a very minimal version of this. So she rounds the corner on the way to the train station, and just before she hops on the train, she sees a civic garbage truck rolling up, and it's got a leaderboard floating over it. And it turns out that this is a thing that she's subscribed to the feed or made the call to view this, and it's a game application that people are competing in to kind of optimize the routes of trucks through the city. And it was coming out of things like, or inspired by things like Code for America, where people are pulling these databases of civic information, opening them to developers to make things to make them more useful, right? So we see real world kind of early signals on this stuff where people are developing applications to make the availability of parking spaces known to you, and just doing that kind of out of a sense of goodness and efficiency for the city. So this is an area that we think is kind of ripe for gamification types of usages. Her train pulls up. She's going to hop onto the train, and we're envisioning that the public transit in this case has an in-vehicle entertainment system like you get on airplanes today, right? So on airplanes today, many of them don't have the headrest screen. They just say connect your personal device, and so we're envisioning that not only does that become available in other forms of transit, but that whether it's a personal car or a bus or a train or what have you, but that it actually becomes a game development platform, right? And so she's subscribed to a particular game that's available on this transit system, and she jumps in. She's a Jane Austen fan, and there's a Jane Austen game which I've badly punned in the title here, and this has a couple of interesting twists to it. So first thing it does is the in-vehicle entertainment system has a lot of computing horsepower to it, and so it can feed a fairly sophisticated set of rendering capabilities, and the train's outfitted with some sensing capabilities so it can track people moving on it, et cetera. And everybody on the train is suddenly on a 19th century rail car, and they're outfitted in top hats and tails and dresses and things like that. And some of them are kind of toned out to basically say, hey, this is a person we've dressed up, but they're not actually engaging in this game. And there's one woman here in the bright yellow dress that is marked as a player, right? And so she's also seeing you in an outfit, and you both know that you're engaged in this title. And the other thing that is doesn't pop off the illustration, but I'll attempt to do some justice to, is that the gameplay has been designed around a social scenario that says, look, these are a bunch of strangers on a train. You're not going to get them to leap up and all go high-five one another or attempt a fist bump or whatever. And so here we've designed a game that has to do with kind of very discreetly passing on bits of gossip around the society that's going on. And so she's got a little gesture to subtly slip a note off to the other woman on the train. And if she does so without anyone else noticing the gesture because they're looking away, they both score some points in terms of their ranking in the society there. And so that's the way that title works. So she does that for a while. She gets caught up on the state of that title. Her train arrives at school, or to the stop near her school, and she pops off the train, and she switches into another application that we've called a Communicolab, or a community collaboration project. And in this case, it's people that are in this case, a public park where they're saying, hey, we're going to design a new play structure for here. We're opening it up for anybody to kind of build proposals or sketch out proposals, and then people can come by and envision those proposals in situ in the park and upvote them or recommend them to friends. And so here she's seeing a student group from Bogota that has kind of recommended this kind of modern sci-fi Mayan-themed play structure, and they're saying, hey, that's kind of cool. So she gives it an upvote and then also kind of recommends it to friends on her society. She heads on to school, and when she gets there, so she's an architecture student, and one of the things that JJ does with her student group as part of this project they're working on is they collaborate on a design, and the design uses a kind of a table of physical props that are involved in kind of sketching out this a public space that they're doing for their project, but then it layers on a shared AR experience on top of it. So they're all wearing they may be different manufacturers' glasses, but they're all communicating and collaborating on the same experience. They're moving physical objects around that are used in part as markers and in part just to give a tactile sense of what's going on. And then the things in blue and in green are simulated on top of that. And so they'll see how the traffic flows and how the pedestrian traffic flows through a public area. They'll simulate plant growth over time and see how the placement of the buildings and how close together or far apart they are might shift the lighting there. So she finishes her day at school. She's agreed earlier on if you noticed on the breakfast table thing, she had arranged with a friend of hers to meet for a run. She heads off to the gym. She has a different set of glasses that they loan out to them there that are more optimized for that experience. So wider field of view and a more immersive experience, but they're also lightweight and optimized to have some air circulation so they don't get all sweaty. They're kind of breathable. And she goes on a run with friends that are at whatever gym they're closest to, and doing this as a synchronized multiplayer experience of going on this trail run in the mountains in Banff, Alberta. And so finishes up that, gets her exercise, says goodbye to her friends, heads home, does a video conference with her mom, who still is like, hey, all that fancy AR stuff, I don't know, I have a tablet, I use Skype, I've used it for 20 years, it's fine. I don't see why I need to change. And so this is kind of a shout out to say that we believe that these systems, part of the design you're going to have to incorporate is that they're going to have to kind of be not necessarily forward-backward compatible, but they're going to have to be able to integrate with older technologies as well and think about how people interfacing things in a different type of UX will still be able to collaborate, communicate, et cetera. So getting that out of the way and having had dinner and gotten her workout in, et cetera, the last thing that she decides to do is she set aside some time for some adventure gaming. So she jumps into a game called Adventure 2025. So shout out to the original Adventure for those that are old enough like me to remember it. And in this case, she's got a different VR rig that she uses that's really aimed at full immersion. So it's wide field of view, haptic suit, controllers that give her more, not only a haptic feel, but a more precise level of control. And just like the AI example that we saw earlier, when she jumps in, it turns out her friends have already started, and she's just dropped live into an ongoing battle. Her AI character is already kind of in combat with this goblin. She basically takes over from it, catches the end of the battle. They get all the loot. They, like all these adventure games, we haven't thought past the process of get the loot, go back and sell it in the town square or whatever. So she heads back to do that, but in this case, all of the people in the town are actually other live players. There's both translation going on as well as kind of voice morphing. So in this case, it's a person from Czechoslovakia who's named Jonas, but he's getting translated live into the sound of this little elderly elf woman who's the shopkeeper, and they engage in some humorous trade and barter for the loot items that she's gotten. As that's been going on for a while, she gets a kind of an in-game interruption from her DigiSquire assistant that says, hey, I know you're having fun, but you said you wanted to be in bed by 11, you need your 8 hours, et cetera. So hey, you might want to wrap that up. So that notification means that those devices need to work together. The applications have to have protocols for how that stuff's going to function. But she jumps out of this experience, heads off to bed. That's the course of her day. So we're going to make a version of these slides available that has all this kind of stuff spelled out if you want to read it. I know we flew through it in a lot of detail here. Why did we come talk about this, right? There's a bunch of these technologies that are still a ways out. There's a bunch that are, I think, closer than many people imagine, and we're already seeing, like some of the examples I cited, kind of the first signals or breadcrumbs of this kind of stuff starting to come together. But there's a lot of stuff that's needed that's apart from just the raw technologies. We need like breakthroughs in design and UI. We need open and interoperable systems so that system A can partake of application B on platform C. It needs a lot of collaboration between people in the industry. So that part's up to the people in this room. So I hope I've given you some stuff to get the creative juices going and that we can all work on this stuff together. Thank you.
So we are at time, and according to the schedule, we start at lunch hour. But if you're up for it, I think
I can do some Q&A if people
questions.
want.
Yeah, feel free to step away. I don't know about the AV team. They also have to take a lunch, but
there's a question over here.
Yeah, hey, Cam.
Hey, how are you? Yeah.
Good, how are you? So, awesome. Love that.
Thanks.
But one interesting thing, I don't think she actually.
I don't know how it works.
What is your take on that, right?
My first take is that you're the second person that gave me the same piece of feedback, and it makes me feel like I'm very sad because like, what's wrong with me that I didn't see that coming? I mean, there was certainly the physically touched. I guess there was the collaboration in the university setting, and there was a haptic suit where the written version has some of that, and there certainly were. I tried for. A lot of kind of social interaction. Like the lengthier version that I wrote this out as a full narrative talks about her being away from home, using this to communicate with friends back home because she didn't know that many people in the new place. But yeah, if I do another one of these, I'm going to have a little more like DDR or something.